Welcome to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. Like any good marriage, we will debate, evaluate, and sometimes quarrel about how privacy and security impact business in the 21st century.
Hi, Jody Daniels here. I'm the founder and CEO of Red Clover Advisors, a certified women's privacy consultancy. I'm a privacy consultant and certified informational privacy professional, providing practical privacy advice to overwhelmed companies.
Hello, Justin Daniels here. I am a technology attorney who is passionate about helping companies solve complex cyber and privacy challenges during the life cycle of their business. I am the cyber quarterback, helping clients design and implement cyber plans, as well as them manage and recover from data breaches.
And this episode is brought to you by Red Clover Advisors. We help companies to comply with data privacy laws and establish customer trust so that they can grow and nurture integrity. We work with companies in a variety of fields, including technology, SaaS, e-commerce, media, and professional and financial services. In short, we use data privacy to transform the way companies do business. Together, we're creating a future where there's greater trust between companies and consumers. To learn more, visit redcloveradvisors.com. You're very quiet today. You're always very chatty after I do our whole intro.
Well, maybe you should start with the chattiness today.
No, that's your job.
I see. Well, you have a nice haircut.
I do. I do have a nice haircut. For all those who are watching on video, I have a nice haircut. And for all of you listening, you should go check it out. It's lovely. Hair day. Woo-hoo. But let's chat about privacy, shall we? We have a really awesome guest today.
All right, I'll let you do the honors.
So we have Daniel Barber, who is the CEO and co-founder of DataGrail. In the new age of privacy, DataGrail is the only purpose-built privacy management platform that ensures sustained compliance with GDPR, CCPA, and what other alphabet privacy laws we're going to come up with. He is also the advisor to several high-growth startups, including Chorus.ai, Outreach.io, and SignOnSite. That is very much an alphabet soup. But Daniel, welcome to the show. We're so glad to have you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Justin. Thank you, Jody, for the invite. And excited to chat with you guys today.
Well, so let's dive in. Our first question we always ask people is, how did they get to where they are in the privacy and security landscape? So fill us in a little bit on how you came to found DataGrail.
Yeah, so as some of you may pick up pretty quickly, I grew up in Australia on the South Coast and moved to the US. My father started the family from here and did my MBA in Japan, and was fortunate to work for a Japanese company. They were very kind to transfer me and move me to San Francisco, so in the Bay Area. And after 14 trips to Japan in 2011, I decided, perhaps I should work for a company local. And started working for a company called Responsys, which at the time, Responsys was really the leading provider for email marketing, solutions. And so when you think about email marketing at this stage, right, Responsys was working with some of the largest consumer brands on the planet. So think, Whole Foods, Southwest Airlines, Lufthansa, JCPenney, and others. And what I observed there was, companies at that stage, and even today, obviously, were using enormous amounts of personal information to drive these campaigns through email, and collecting and sort of aggregating lots of personal information about us, right? And so what am I actually talking about? I'm talking about they would have your email address, they would buy demographic information from different data sources, they would buy local weather information to serve, targeted email campaigns. So if you're located in Minneapolis and it happened to be snowing that day, when you would open your email, they would look at the IP address of that location, dynamically populate the content based on, Jody, being a woman in age bracket X. They would say, okay, great, maybe you need a snow jacket and some ski boots because it's snowing today. And so this was really cool. So in 2012, right, I was pretty in awe of what marketers were doing. But as we think about that outcome today, right, obviously, not really with privacy in mind, right? And so this is pre-GDPR, pre-California Consumer Privacy Act, certainly pre-Cambridge Analytica. as we fast forwarded, I joined a smaller company. I knew I wanted to found a business and eventually solve a large problem. So I joined a company called ToutApp, where we were actually doing email for salespeople. So really kind of leading the way in what is now described as sort of this sales engagement category. And so I partnered with the founder early on and had an amazing experience there. I kind of describe it as my startup MBA. So just over 2 years at ToutApp, learned an enormous amount. But the second kind of point of resonance around this problem with data privacy was that, in 2015, I signed 200 data processing agreements. So when you do something 200 times, you start to wonder why you're doing it. And again, this is like pre-GDPR, pre-California Consumer Privacy Act, like obviously pre-Cambridge Analytica. And so I came to the end of the year sort of asking myself, like, why do businesses care about this? Like, there's no fines in this data privacy agreement that I'm reading, right? Or data processing agreement, sorry. Why is this important to businesses? And so, what became clear was that there's an enormous amount of information being transferred across all of these applications. And I saw that in my last experience working at a company called DataGrail, where we looked at 40 million websites and looked at the technologies that people would use to run their business. And the last kind of realization that I came to was that every business runs on technology, including the one that we're actually engaged in right now. Red Clover, we're running on Zoom, right? You have other services to improve this recording. And so what those services are, I have no idea. And so if we think about that, right, if there are many applications organized in a business, but the consumer has the expectation that they're in control of their information, there's a disconnect there. And that's why we founded DataGrail.
Now, we're always saying that companies are in the data business. So you were kind of talking about, right? Everyone's using technology and everyone's utilizing data. And I remember those really early days of the dynamic content and email marketing. And
it was cool.
I got my start in privacy by stalking people for cars using data from AutoTrader. And anyone who bought a car, you're welcome. It's kind of the same idea. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
You're smirky over there.
Oh, why not? So from your view, how would you describe the current state of privacy programs in companies?
Kind of in flux would be my first response, right? I think many businesses that are internationally focused, right, were leading up to the GDPR trying to figure out what they need to do. This was a long walk, right, from 2016 through 17 through 18. And, now we're talking about that was 3 years ago, right? And so they might have implemented something to stand up the program. For domestically focused businesses, the CCPA was probably the first regulatory requirement that they had to jump over, right? And so I would say, like, across the board, most companies have no idea what applications they've actually purchased. And this is accelerated in the last, call it 18 months, because now we are doing work from home, right? And so, people are in a dynamic work environment as well. So they might be working from home one day, they might be on the road, on a beach on another day, they might be, who knows, right, where they are. And so the application use, and as a result, the number of locations where personal information could be has expanded dramatically. And so I think like flux would be my one word to describe where we are today.
If you think about those 200 data protection agreements, which was actually very impressive, because I find today it's really hard for companies to execute those things when they're required, so that you had companies doing it when it was just a lovely nice to have. But if you think about where that was to what you see today, on a scale of 1 to 10, how far have we moved?
Good question. I think we have made some progress, right? I think now it's very common that people at least understand that they need to do a data processing agreement, right? That is generally understood what a DPA is. Completing 200 of them, there was a reason why we were doing it, and it's because ToutApp, the solution, the provider I was working for at the time, we were tracking people's emails, right? So the service basically allowed salespeople and anyone really to use ToutApp. If they would send an email, they could see whether you opened that email, whether you clicked a piece of content, whether you forwarded it, where you opened it, the location. some pretty sensitive information, right? These systems and solutions exist today and have in fact proliferated everywhere. But that's why companies were very sensitive about what we were doing with their information because it was fairly new. But I think now it is generally understood. A DPA is something that any legal professional understands. Even if you're buying technology as a member of the workforce, right? If you're in the marketing team or customer success team or wherever you are in the organization, you know that you probably need to do a DPA. So I think there's generally more awareness. I think the consumer is substantially more aware than they were before, right? This is a result of many somewhat unfortunate circumstances that have happened with data breaches and generally just understanding of one's information and where it's going. And so I think consumer awareness has increased, consumer expectations have increased too, but the challenges in businesses remain. And so I think, that's where there is opportunity to, connect that gap.
And I also see from a B2B standpoint that the awareness is increased. So we're talking about consumers, but also the B2B environment. Many times vendors are requiring this of customers. Customers are like, I got to figure this out. Mm-hmm. It might start with a DPA. It might start with a question. So we're certainly moving in that direction.
Agreed.
So with individual rights being a big part of privacy regulations, what does a company need to know about honoring an individual's data requests?
Yeah. So this is kind of interesting if you think about it, right? Last year, we surveyed 2,000 Americans. So I spoke on PBS about our survey, and we had 83% of people respond and say they want control over their information. So I think regardless of the regulations, which of course we could talk about the alphabet soup, Jody, to your point, there's lots of them. Consumers want control, right? That's what they're actually looking for here. And that's like an emotional connection too. They want to understand what a business is doing with their information. And so I think we see the leading brands really leading with transparency in terms of, hey, you can get access and control the information that we've collected about you. You can restrict the sale of that information if you don't feel comfortable with that. The challenge is that most companies are starting from square one, right? They have purchased software, right? It might be Zoom, it might be Slack, it might be Salesforce, it might be, name 200 other software tools. And they've purchased those over the last 5 years or a decade or multiple decades. Now they have no idea where that information is or what those systems even do. The number of CISOs, chief privacy officers that I speak to that know all of the applications that they have and what's in them, I could count on one hand, right? Total in doing this for a while. And so I think like starting with understanding what you've purchased is the only way to satisfy that data rights component, right? If you can't actually satisfy that properly. And we see a lot of businesses shortcut here, right? So they'll just provide the information that's available in maybe 2 or 3 of the systems that they own. But in reality, they've got 100 systems processing your information. So is that an accurate representation of what they hold about you? Definitely not.
With that being said, with it being so hard for companies or people to know all the different systems, where does software come in to be able to help solve this problem?
Yeah, it's a good question too. I think it's really important to think about like first centralizing the applications that you use, right? And so there are solutions in the market that drive the security of those applications, right? So things like Okta and OneLogin and ForgeRock and Ping Identity and others that will allow a business to say, okay, any tool that we purchase needs to go through this secure process, meaning if you join a company, you get access to the 22 tools that you need in the marketing department. If you join that same company in HR, you get access to the 12 tools in HR that you would need to operate your job. That's a good starting point. And certainly the mature organizations that we see have implemented, single sign-on is sort of commonly what that's described as. That's a requirement really at this stage, especially with a dynamic workforce. But then also the realization that not all applications will make their way into those applications, right? So even the tool that's meant to control the other tools, the tools may not actually get in there. And so acknowledging that as well and saying, okay, we probably need to find a tool that finds the tools that are not connected to the tool that's meant to manage the tools. So, that's an area that we help with and help businesses with, because it is a scary thing, right? This kind of concept of shadow IT and your employees using applications that process personal information. This is hard. And so the combination of like usually a single sign-on provider and something like DataGrail to help with that is a good starting point.
The other thing I was going to say is a lot of times, so I like your tools for tools and write software to help be able to find tools. A lot of times people also think, if I just find the software, I'm done. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about how it's software plus people who know how to use the software to be able to help make it all work together.
Yeah, so that's an interesting area. So what we commonly see legal professionals, and I imagine many of the folks that may listen to the podcast, or security professionals, right, struggling with is there is no way you could understand every application in marketing, right? You just can't. And more importantly, you can't understand the relationships between the applications, which is actually probably the more important part. So just like double clicking on that to expand on it a little bit. If you've bought Salesforce, right? And so Salesforce becomes a central application to manage your customer data, as an example, right? That application has an ecosystem of things that can connect to it. And so there might be 20 other things downstream that have been installed into your Salesforce environment that are also collecting the same personal information or more. And so just acknowledging that, like, it's very unlikely that you're going to try to figure out every application there unless you really intend to, go around and survey, right? Which is the option, go around and survey every department and try to keep that up to date, which is a monumental task that, is really why we founded the company.
Makes sense.
So with privacy laws changing, how do you think about that evolution in terms of companies preparing to comply with multi-state and this global privacy patchwork system that we seem to be going towards?
Yeah, so this is not going to work. Like, the path that we're going down right now is like not going to work, right? I think generally the informed class of folks that are in this, like we are, acknowledge, even the way that you described that question, Justin, this is not going to work. So there needs to be standards, right? Like, and global standards, right? And so there are industry groups that are working to do this and work on this area. I wrote a post in TechCrunch a few weeks ago specifically on this topic around standards. So the Consumer Reports is working with a consortium of different vendors, DataGrail included, that we're trying to understand how data rights can be standardized, right? Because even just like the simplest thing of you ask for your information from Kohl's, right? What is Kohl's collecting on you? Does Kohl's provide the same information back in the format that, I don't know, Sears does, right? I can guarantee you one thing, they don't.
Is Sears still around?
I think so.
I wasn't sure.
And as I said that out loud, I actually had to question myself. But you get where I'm going there, right? Of every business is operating this differently, and the regulations are forcing them to adopt different standards based on where people are located. This is not going to work. And so actually there needs to be technology standards that are in partnership with legal standards, right? So what do I mean by that? Well, if we had, California has this do not sell provision. That's great. I think that makes sense. I don't want businesses selling my information in certain circumstances, but that is slightly different than the GDPR. And as we know, also different than other state regulatory requirements. So if we just went down the path of 14 different paths here, that doesn't work. And so we need some technology standards in order to actually pragmatically think about how we solve this problem.
Yeah, it's a great point. If you think about the three states, California and upcoming Virginia and Colorado, even their required links on the homepage are all supposed to be a little bit different. We can't have
You
three
can't do
independent
that.
links.
You can't
Which one
do
are you going to pick?
you
Do
can't
not
do
sell,
that.
do
Like,
not
it's
share.
just not
Well,
gonna
what about
work.
targeted ads? Well, they're close, but not exactly. So it is certainly a big problem.
So Daniel, I'm just curious as a follow-up question.
Yeah.
These state laws are proliferating, at least in the United States, because on a federal level, there's no consensus, there's no agreement over what to do about this problem. From what you see in your business and whatnot, do you see that changing, or is it going to take some kind of black swan event to precipitate a change to get some type of, because really what we're talking about here is having a GDPR-like federal law that covers all 50 states?
Yes. So, but even if that happens, though, Justin, so like, just simplifying it down to like the domestic level, yes. But if you're a global business, so you operate LGPD, you operate some national law, you operate GDP, that doesn't work either, right? Because if you have 15 countries that you're operating in, all with different frameworks, like that doesn't work. Now, we're just talking about like making it a little easier in the US for the domestic folks, but if you're international, you couldn't afford to operate your program that way either. So I think it actually goes further than just like a national bill, which certainly that wouldn't hurt. But I think really what we're talking about is some technology standards to make this a little easier for businesses, because yes, you can't have 4 different links on your homepage. Like if you talk to a marketer and propose that solution, they're going to leave the building, right? So like, let's talk about like practical business here. I think though there's enough support for at the local level some form of national bill, but like when are we going to see that? I don't know. I'm not hitting a date at this point, and I think it's like it's going to take some more pain before we see real change on that.
We've talked about a lot of different challenges. One of the main ones obviously has been around just how do you create a program to comply with all of these different laws? What are some of the other big challenges that you're seeing companies face today?
Yeah, so one of them is related to California's requirement around do not sell, right? Because the definition is quite wide. And obviously the sale of information, if you're a data broker, I mean, that's pretty obvious, right? I sold my email address to you, Jody, you bought it for 25 cents. Okay, that's selling information, right? But loyalty programs, okay, I think we extend those to that's probably sale of information if you're extending that information to other service providers. Got it. Ad tech, what do you do with that, right? So publishers are now selling your information indirectly on the open market to other people in real time. That creates some challenges for folks of like how they're going to interpret that, and how far and how much risk they want to take to do that. So I think that's one area that's quite challenging for folks, especially if they don't have legal support, right? Of like how to interpret the requirements. I think another area that you're seeing advances quite quickly, right? So Apple's new requirements around deletion of apps, right? So meaning, as a requirement through privacy regulations, it is now a requirement for folks that do have apps to be able to delete that information. That's difficult, right? People may not have actually set up their infrastructure in a way to do that. And how many people have a mobile app on the App Store? A lot. So that's really hard for folks, and they probably weren't ready for that, right? Like it's not like there was a memo that went out 2.5 years ago, like the GDPR, to kind of figure out what to do there. So I think that's quite hard for folks that are operating, with mobile apps. And then the other piece that I described, right, of just that dynamic workplace, that's really hard. How do you try to empower your employees to share the applications they're using or find some vehicle to be able to capture that information? That needs to happen because the concept of a VPN, right, is nice in theory until you have employees not using it. And we should expect that they're not going to use it, because if you expect that they do use it every time, you're going to be disappointed with the outcome.
So if we were at a cocktail party and we were having this kind of conversation, as a privacy pro, what is your best personal tip that you might give to our audience?
Yeah, it's a funny one. I read that question. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I think what I find interesting, and it may not be necessarily a personal tip, it's more just validation that we are going to be, and the three of us are going to be solving this problem for the next decade. So Rick Arney is the co-author of the CCPA. And, I was having a conversation with him a few months ago, and he shared a little bit about his path to passing that bill and what that looked like, and Proposition 24 with Alistair McTaggart and the group. And something that stood out to me was just, the legislature in California has come to terms with the fact that any bill that passes, the watermark standard is 90%, right? So 90% is the highest amount you can get in terms of support for a bill. And what is that watermark based on? It's based on human trafficking, right? So when laws were passed around that area, support for restricting human trafficking was 90%. So there are 10% of people that, of course, just don't support the process, and so as a result, will by default select no under all circumstances, right? So it's you basically, the highest you're going to get is 90%. But what was interesting, moved forward, support for the bill was at 88%. So there was literally not a similar bill that has been passed that received the same level of support. So the legislature in California is supporting, and the electorate is supporting privacy reform at a level only compared to human trafficking. And neither of those topics are funny, but the point is, we are going through a change, and so I think just as an area of excitement, there is excitement ahead around trying to solve this problem, and we're going to be doing this for the next decade.
Well, Justin, that's good job security.
Let's hope so.
So when we're not all going to be trying to help companies solve this problem for the next decade, what do you like to do for fun that is not privacy and security?
Do you go buy consumer products and read the privacy policies?
I may do that. I'm not going to lie. No, at this point, I have traveled to a number of places, right? I'm sort of, by definition, a global citizen, if you will. I've lived in 7 different countries to get to here. And so I do like traveling a lot. My fiance is also from New Zealand, and so the two of us kind of have fun wherever we can go. So yeah, traveling as much as we can. Hiking around the Bay Area is pretty popular, and so I do that a lot. Also just working, it's nice to have some outdoor time. And so a combination of those two things would probably be my short list.
We must attract similar people, because many times people always say that they love hiking and they love the outdoors, which is very similar to what we really enjoy here too.
Lovely.
Well, it was such a lovely discussion. If people want to be able to connect with you and learn more also about DataGrail, where should they go?
Yep. So you can find me on the white pages of the internet, otherwise known as LinkedIn. So if you just search Daniel Barber, you'll probably find me there. You can find me on Twitter. So my handle is a little strange. It's Gaijin Dan, so Gaijin Dan. That is Japanese for foreign person. So foreign person Dan. So you can find me there. Those are probably the best 2 places.
Awesome. Justin, any closing thoughts?
Data privacy is job security. That could be a bumper sticker. Thank you, Daniel.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, had fun.
Thanks for listening to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes and check us out on LinkedIn. See you next time.